Hi, I'm Linda Hatch. I'm a clinical psychologist and certified sex addiction therapist. And I'm here today to talk to you a little about what the impact of sex addiction is on intimacy and relationships. And this is based on my experience in working with sex addicts and working with partners of sex addicts. And I would like to invite you to ask questions in the chat box as we go along, and I will try to answer them or answer them at the end if I can. And so I'd like to begin by talking a little about what happens when a sex addict in a relationship, a marriage, a boyfriend, girlfriend, any kind of partnership is found out, and the partner or spouse has to deal with the sudden revelation that their partner or their spouse is engaging in sexually addictive behavior. This has been always considered to be a betrayal, an extreme betrayal, in fact. And it doesn't really matter what the behavior is that the person engages in, the addict. He or she engaging in, it could be internet porn, it could be done compulsively. It could be going to prostitutes or sexual massage parlors. It could be any of a number, it could be serial affairs, any of a number of behaviors which have been going on in secret, which are suddenly, it suddenly comes out, and the person who is in the relationship with that addict is going to be experiencing a very extreme shock and betrayal, no matter what the behavior is that they discover. And the first reaction of their partner, the addict, may be to deny it or to minimize it or to try to, placate the partner and say, well, everything's going to be all right and nothing to worry about. I'll get help, I promise, or I'll never do it again. And this is usually something that the partner should take with a grain of salt because it doesn't usually work that way. Most often the spouse or partner is in the position, what I call, of a first responder in the situation. The partner or spouse is confronted with this major betrayal and they have to deal with it. Now in sex addiction treatment, we work with partners and spouses, and mostly these days this situation is seen as one in which the partner or spouse is experiencing something very much like post-traumatic stress disorder. In fact, that's the way people who work with spouses of sex addicts actually deal with the partner in the beginning phases of the discovery and crisis situation. So the partner or spouse will be in a state of shock. They will be experiencing extreme stress symptoms of being maybe emotionally volatile, maybe lashing out, maybe feeling or being irrational, and having severe conflicts about what to do next and whether even to stay with the person or how to help them. I think many people have as their first instinct to help their partner. And you should trust that instinct. If you're in that position, you should believe that your intuition is correct, that this partner of yours is someone who needs help. But very often the person feels like, who is this? I don't know who this person is because they've been lying to me all this time. And maybe, I just saw a couple where the husband had been having affairs for 40 years, nonstop, some of them one-night stands. So, and I just want to stress that, we in the field treat these partners and spouses of porn addicts in the same way as we treat any partner or spouse of any sex addiction, of any sex addict, because it is experienced exactly the same level of betrayal as if the person was actually involved with another human being. So what is the partner or spouse supposed to do when they get to this point and they're like in this crisis? My feeling is that it's up to the partner or spouse to if need be, to take the initiative and make an appointment with a certified sex addiction therapist, someone in this field, because going to just a regular marriage counselor is kind of dicey, because they may be very sophisticated about these issues, and they may not. And I've had people tell me, well, we went to a marriage counselor and they said it was no big deal. So it's kind of important that you get the right person, and you can find listings for certified sex addiction therapists online in some of the major sites, like International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Professionals, like Psychology Today. There's a lot of places. Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health. They all have listings. And the other thing that I think I really want to stress is for partners and spouses of sex addicts to realize that they are in a unique position in the addict's life at that point. The partner or spouse is probably the first person or only person who really knows at least part of the truth of what's gone on. And they are the person with the most leverage. So if a couple show up in my office and the addict is kind of like trying to wriggle out of getting help, and the partner or spouse is, kind of adamant and says, no, you got to do this or else, then I'm in a good position, because I can then give them a menu of options as to how to proceed to get the help that they need. But if the spouse or partner is not taking an affirmative stand about it, it makes the therapist's job harder, because then the therapist doesn't have any leverage, or doesn't have as much leverage actually as the partner or spouse. So it's really up to the partner or spouse to use the leverage they have in the beginning, when the crisis hits, when the sex addiction is having its impact on the relationship, for them to go ahead and say, you got to do this, and to make, to be really clear about that, and to mean what they say, and not back down, and just take a very firm stand, and insist that the addict get help, and get help themselves. So let's say that they do get to that point, and the addict does agree to go into some form of treatment. At that point, I feel like there's a key factor here that is often overlooked, which is that partners and spouses, when they've just discovered this massive betrayal in their relationship, the partner's been lied to, a whole part of the addict's life has been, completely compartmentalized somewhere else. The spouse feels the partner is like, who is this person? I thought I could trust them. I don't even know who they are anymore. And even the addict feels a little like that. They sometimes feel like they've been living a double life, and they're two people, and it's out of control. At that point, it's easy for both people to feel a lot of irrational feelings and fears, and to project those or take those out on each other. And so in the very beginning, at least, it is my opinion that the two partners need to be seen separately, and to work on their own support, and get their own support, and work on their own issues separately, rather than trying to be a support system for each other. In the beginning, in the crisis phase of discovery or disclosure, the two people want to try to be, and they're used to trying to support each other in some way in the marriage or in the relationship. And that might be the first reflex, is to try to listen to, comfort, support, be the therapist to each other, encourage, and some of that's okay, but by and large, I really feel that they're not going to get the kind of support they need from each other, that they're going to get it for a while, at least, from somebody else, from other people that they trust, from therapists, from support groups, from friends that they can confide in. And sometimes who they confide in isn't always a matter of agreement between them, but that's just something I think you have to roll with. I don't know what else, because each person has to decide who they feel comfortable with, who they feel is safe to talk to, and not necessarily disclosing everything to just anybody, in the very beginning, because, as I say, people are in a kind of irrational, haywire state sometimes in the first stages of recovery. So let's say they get to the point of each one wanting to get some help. The partner, let's say they're able to trust their instincts. They're able to say, you know, I need to take care of myself. I need to get all the help and support I can from the people that I care about and that care about me. What about the addict? In all likelihood, if the addict has been seen by and evaluated by a certified sex addiction therapist, he or she will be given some options. And depending on what their situation is, not on the acting out behavior itself, but depending on what kind of shape they're in and how much they are able to do at that moment, they may be asked to try and go to a residential rehab facility for sex addiction. In which case they'll get a sort of intensive 1 month to 6 weeks experience of treatment and education and support and about their addiction, and hopefully a period of complete abstinence during being in a rehab facility, so they won't be able to do their acting out behavior, whatever it is. And by acting out behavior, I mean what the addict does outside of the relationship to give themselves that sexual charge that is their drug, and I'll go back to that in a minute. So they dry out, I guess, and you could say, in a sense, in a rehab facility, or they can go to what's called an intensive outpatient program. These are wonderful. You don't live in the place. You just go to a clinic every day from like 9 to 5, and you do different activities. You do classes, individual therapy, group therapy, 12-step meetings, and lots of educational work, and lots of exercises and inventories about yourself and about your addiction. And you get really a lot of information really fast, and a lot of work on yourself really fast. It's not in-depth psychotherapy or anything like that. It's breaking through all of the denial mechanisms that have been in place so long. It's understanding what sex addiction is and how it works and what it's not. It's getting an inkling of the havoc that it wreaks on your life and on your relationships and on yourself if you're the addict. So sometimes as part of those intensive outpatient programs, the spouse or partner will be included for a little bit of the time in terms of getting their input, in terms of having them write an impact letter, that sort of thing. This helps the addict, but it isn't like a form of couples therapy. So 12-step work is usually a large part of any program for sex addicts. Usually the 3 things that they need are therapy, and a 12-step program, and some kind of support or group therapy group. So all of these are recommended when the person leaves. If they go to a residential program or they go to an intensive outpatient program, they are told they have a whole follow-up plan, which has to do with going to meetings, often, like Sex Addicts Anonymous, like Sexaholics Anonymous, or there are a couple of others too. So they do that. They are encouraged to be in individual and group therapy, and to build up some amount of time being abstinent from any behavior that relates to their sexually addictive acting out behavior. And that usually means they need a period of total sexual abstinence. And this is another one of the things that impacts a relationship. If the partner and the addict are staying together, usually it's recommended that they do not have sex for anywhere from a couple of months to 6 months, depending on the situation, because that even sex with a partner for the addict can be problematic. It can trigger addictive fantasies. It can, it can hold the person back from having their whole brain reboot in the way that it needs to in recovery. So, so then what happens? So let's suppose that that the couple see it through this period, and the spouse or partner has been working on him or herself, trying to understand, what, if any, their part in it was, working through the trauma of the betrayal, taking care of themselves, and essentially going through the beginning phases of a grief process, because this relationship that they had wasn't what either one of them thought it was. Because it was built on lies and it was built on deception, and so they don't really know each other in a sense. And I think for the spouses and partners, part of the impact of the whole situation is having to sort of reevaluate the relationship. It may have been seen as a very romantic or, kind of a model relationship as far as the outside world was concerned. But, at some point, they realize, this wasn't what I thought. This person, wasn't who I thought they were, and our relationship isn't what I thought it was. And how did I get myself into it? How did I, end up here? And so those are things that they really should look at, and maybe not in the beginning when they're sort of shell-shocked, but as they go along in their own recovery. Okay, so here we are. Maybe the addict's been abstinent for a significant period of time, and now, there's some interest in trying to relate to a partner in a different way, to really move back toward repairing a relationship with their spouse. Well, what I want to bring up here is that sex addiction isn't, in our view as sex addiction therapists, it isn't just about getting the person to stop doing the behavior, getting them to stop exposing themselves in parking garages, getting them to stop, watching internet porn for 10 hours a week. It isn't just trying to get them to stay away from flirting and having, flirtations online or with other people or affairs. They could stop doing whatever they're doing. Usually there's more than one behavior. There may be a combination of things. It's addressing the central feature of the problem, which is that they have what we call an intimacy disorder. And so what is an intimacy disorder? It's the fact that the person, the addict, cannot relate with all of themselves in an intimate relationship. They have been an addict because they needed to take some of the parts of themselves that related to the most vulnerable parts of themselves out of the relationship and put them somewhere else. And so they've split off a piece of themselves. And the reason that happens with sex addicts is because it's essential to them that they are relationally and intimacy avoidant. So this intimacy avoidance is part of what's going on in the marriage, or the relationship, even if it's not identified as such during the course of the marriage or during the course of the relationship. So the addict has been essentially living in fear of really revealing who they are, has been kind of avoiding being honest about what they feel, being honest about what they fear, being open completely with who they are, trusting the person that they're with completely. And, part of the reasons for this are that almost universally, sex addicts grow up in family situations which are deficient in a strong bond with a caregiver, a strong and reliable bond with a caregiver, and this leads to attachment issues. So that the addict grows up insecure in the area of close relating, because maybe it doesn't have to be that they were abused or neglected physically or sexually, which happens a lot with sex addicts, but they could just have an early childhood in which their caregivers or parents were disengaged, were absent, were uninvolved with them, were not able to give them the kind of support and nurturing that they needed at some key point. It could be just due to the illness of a parent. It doesn't have to be that they're bad people, but somehow the addict felt insecure and abandoned by people, or hurt by people they were closest to growing up. So and this is, this is a documented fact about addicts, sex addicts, and probably all addicts, but so it leaves them in a bad place in terms of forming intimate relationships with spouses and partners. And I've had sex addicts tell me that when they think of intimacy, they think of pain. They expect abandonment, they expect to get hurt. So they are guarded, and they don't always seem like they can keep up a good front, but they are actually keeping a piece of themselves outside of the relationship. And one way that comes out is in sexual acting out, as a kind of way that they can feel sort of a false sense of being accepted, being loved, being able to be free, being able to be open in a safe, supposedly safe situation. The trouble is it's addictive, and it becomes a drug, and then it has its own a life of its own. Okay, so this intimacy disorder is part and parcel of the addiction, and it is addressed in therapy as a next phase in the addict's recovery. And I think it is the most encouraging part of the recovery process and of the treatment of the addict. Because what happens is sometimes the addict will be able to be abstinent from their sexually acting out behavior, and then be able to begin to have a sex life with their partner, be able to, feel like they're on the right track, and the partner still feels mistrustful. Why? And this is common. A year out, the partner is still mistrustful. Well, the survey data show that it takes about a year for a partner to begin to trust their addict husband, wife, partner after the initial beginning of recovery. Building trust takes a long time. And one of the things that I believe is crucial to building trust for the addict and for the partner and spouse of the addict to do is just to be able to see that the addict has in fact addressed these intimacy issues, that they have embraced recovery to the extent that they want to change. They don't just want to give up whatever the addiction has been, which is a good thing for the relationship. But they also want to live in a different way. They want to live in integrity. They want to be able to be honest. They want to not hide things from their partner. And in order for the partner to feel that this is genuine, they have to really see their partner, sex addict, begin to embrace recovery for its own sake. In other words, I'm not doing it for you, my wife, my husband. I'm doing it for me. And when the partner begins to see that person immerse him or herself in their own recovery, and value that recovery, and value the fact that they're becoming a different kind of person, an honest person, value the things, the integrity that they've been able to begin to build up in themselves, and the fact that they now are engaged with their recovery group, engaged with their 12-step group, are interested in therapy for its own sake, interested in their own growth, interested in themselves. It's not like, oh, I'll do it for her. That's when it starts to seem, I think, to the partners and spouses that the person has really changed and is really going to continue to change, and they begin to trust that person, so that addict. Not to just sort of say, okay, well, I did that, now let's go back to the way it was, because you can't go back to the way it was. You don't want to go back to the way it was. So that's sort of a whirlwind tour of what happens in sex addiction recovery, from the crisis of disclosure onward to, you know, how to deal with getting help and rebuilding a relationship. Um, you know, I have a lot more written about, I have a lot of blogs that I've written on my own website, which is www.sexaddictionscounseling.com. And also I have a blog page on psychcentral.com called Impact of Sex Addiction. And I'd love if you come and drop by either of those places and take a look at some of the blogs, because a lot of them have to do with recovering couples, with treatment, with rebuilding trust, with intimacy disorder, with cybersex and intimacy disorder, and a variety of topics that are related directly to this issue of relationships and the disclosure of sex addiction. So I think I'll stop talking there, and I'd like to be able to answer any questions that anybody wants to type in to the chat, and I'm here to do that, and I will stick around to see if there are any questions, and I'll just give that a minute here to see what happens with that. And I have a question. Do many people recover? About how long until you consider it a full recovery? Thanks. I'm sorry if there's a delay in my answering here. Many people recover. Good question. Thank you. I meant to say this. I am constantly amazed by how many people stay together and repair their relationships. I think it's something like 60%. So yeah, I mean, the odds are with you if you, especially if you do all the, and that's even, you know, just across the board, but if you do all of the things that are involved in both people's recovery and in couple recovery, and there's even Recovering Couples Anonymous, which is a wonderful program for couples dealing with exactly these issues. So if you go and you do all of this stuff, probably it's really pretty good odds that if you want to, you can, both the addict and the relationship can recover and continue on a new basis, be a new relationship. Sometimes we talk about it as though it's like premarital counseling after addiction, you know, because you don't know what their new relationship's going to look like. You don't know, how it's going to work. But so yeah, if you realize you're starting out on a new footing, it can work. And about how long until you get the full recovery? Wow, you know, the 12-step line is you can never be 100% sure that you couldn't have a relapse, but you know, I think people can be in really solid recovery after about a year if they've been working the program hard. I don't know, for some people it takes a lot longer. I mean, some people have been in recovery for several years and will have a relapse, especially with pornography. So, and I've talked about, you know, in one of my blogs, frequent porn addiction relapse and some of the special factors that relate to that. But by and large, you know, I think if the addict has gotten really a really good intensive level of treatment in the beginning and has followed through with the program and has, you know, just really just done all the things you have to do and stayed sober for, sexually sober for a period of time, then I think that they can be in full recovery, you know, depending. Um, but full recovery isn't just being able to not be acting out in your addiction, as I said before. Full recovery in terms of being able to have a viable relationship that's a good relationship going forward, to be able to deal with problems that arise with children and extended family and do those appropriately and work through all those issues. You know, there's a lot of more far-reaching issues, and that's like the whole process is talked about as being a 3 to 5 year deal. So I would say at the end of 3 to 5 years, if you've done all of the work, you're probably pretty much in the clear. But like I say, you know, there's some people for whom relapse is a real problem, and that's a whole nother topic. But thanks for the question. So wait and see if there are any more. Okay, another question. Is it better to be in a relationship during recovery, or should you be single? Okay, well, like I was saying before, my view is that in the beginning of recovery, when the addict is first just, you know, first beginning to get into treatment, if they're married, they should, or if they're with someone, they should probably have some kind of separation. Now, it doesn't, I mean, it's because it's a little hard to be bumping into the person that's betrayed you, that you feel like, you know, you have all these mixed feelings about the situation, you know, if you're living together. But many people do that. They just stay together and somehow work it through. I think it's easier if you can sort of, you know, amicably realize that you need a little bit of space. Not to say that you're necessarily going to get divorced, but that you're going to give each other room to work on yourselves. If it works, I mean, it's really up to between the people and them and their therapist and their own support systems as to how they feel they want to handle that. Being single, I don't know. I don't think you should try to form a new relationship in recovery, in the early stages of recovery. I think that's a bad idea. But I think at some point it's a good idea to start to try to have real relationships with real people, because most addicts don't, you know, many single addicts don't have relationships with human beings. They have relationships on chat, sexual chat, or somebody they hire, or, you know, an image on a porn video. So, you know, for them it's a big hurdle after they've already gotten sober from acting out their addiction. They have the next hurdle is to you know, how to approach something that they're probably afraid of, which is to start dating. And you know, I have more information on that. If you're interested, go on my webpage and send me an email, and I'll I mean, there's like a sober dating guide that you can use. There's ways to think through what, you know, what the challenges are for the person dating for the first time, maybe, or, you know, or going back to dating after they've been like totally gone into their addiction. So there's a lot of fears and some ground rules that you need to go by, I think, if you're going to be dating. Like, I don't think it's a good idea, like I say, in the first maybe even year, you know, 9 months to a year into recovery before you actually think about getting intimate with anyone. I think it's kind of important to let your head clear for that long and to be just working on yourself. But then it's important not to isolate. It's important to start getting your feet wet with like I say, with real people, and to learn how to have an intimate relationship with someone. And first steps. It's sometimes quite difficult. So I hope that answers that. I'll just give it another minute here. Question, in your opinion, is pornography a major factor in sex addiction? Yeah. Internet porn is a complicating factor in sex addiction. And that's a whole big topic, but many sex addicts who have other behaviors or had other behaviors prior to the internet even. Maybe they were voyeurs, maybe they were, they went to sexual massage parlors, maybe they went to strip clubs. So that involves getting out of the house and takes a little pre-planning, some anyway. Then here comes the internet porn and the proliferation of internet porn, and it makes it easier for them to just sit in front of a computer and access that hyper arousal that they get from their sexual fantasy life in porn. So yeah, it's a complicating factor, and it makes things easier for the addict. And sometimes internet porn addiction exists alongside, like I said before, many addicts have more than one behavior. They'll go to massage parlors and hookers, they'll do internet porn and voyeurism, so a combination. And internet porn itself will escalate over time, like all addictions escalate. It's a drug, the same amount and the same level of extremeness doesn't work anymore. You have to go to a higher extreme level of extreme stimulation. You have to have more of it, do it more, so it has that potential to escalate very quickly too. Another question here. Hi from the UK, bless you, thank you. I gave up porn when I accepted Jesus over 20 years ago. Sometimes I get tempted, but don't succumb to porn. I think it says phew. Good for you. Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe that recovery involves a spiritual awakening and involves getting in touch with yourself and with a higher power. So I'm one of those that's pro 12-step work and pro any kind of spiritual practice that helps people along that road. Because I think sex addicts are very disconnected people. As I was saying before, it's an intimacy disorder, and they're not only not intimate with their partner, they're not intimate with themselves, and they're not intimate with a higher power. However they conceive that. So yeah, great. And thank you for sending a message from the UK.